Hi everybody, just check that I'm recording. I think I am. So this is a follow-up to me working on doing this with the Minded Institute. I'm Fiona Agombar and welcome if you're watching this. So this is the follow-up to the observation and teaching that I did with Pippa, who had ME, and I know many of you watched me work for about 50 minutes with her, and then you asked some questions, and there are some more questions, and also there's a couple of things I've thought about since that time that I just wanted to go over. So thank you all so much for your questions. They're really great questions which have made me think and have helped me too in my teaching, so thank you for that. Just a couple of observations I wanted to make following up from my session with Pippa. And that was, you may remember that I was slightly concerned that her rib cage was quite tight and stuck. And what I observed was that this led to upper chest breathing. So she did say to me that she felt she was a deep breather, but when I was observing her breathing, I could see her chest rise quite fast. So I did mention this at the time, but I think it's really important that she gets help with moving that area, because if her rib cage can move, then she's going to find that her diaphragm will move more freely, and that alone will really help her energy. So she can then start to breathe slowly from the diaphragm, and that will of course help with the uptake of oxygen into the cells. So that's quite a vital part, I think, in helping her to manage her condition. I also wanted to say that I have followed up with Pippa and I've sent her a yoga nidra. So everybody I work with ME, I do advise that they do a yoga nidra every day. And also somebody had asked me the question, what was the goal of teaching? And I kind of said, well, you know, we're not too goal orientated and it's about working with the breath. But I think something that I forgot to say was that, of course, we think of the second sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, we're always really thinking about if we are goal orientated, or maybe if we're working towards something, it's for the mind to be peaceful and calm. Because I talked a bit about freedom, and of course for the mind to be peaceful, that's encouraging us to be free as well. I mentioned, or Pippa had talked about having fibromyalgia. So when I work with somebody with fibromyalgia, I always use loads of padding. And I think I did mention at the time that I might use up to 3 mats for them to lie on, lots of cushions. And then I'll go on to your questions now. So I'll just bring these up. So the first question is, what would I say to someone who suffers from symptoms and conditions same or similar to the participant in the session, and who comments that the issue with yoga is that it focuses on the body and that it's hard because his or her body is always in pain and everywhere is painful? Now this is an excellent question, because how do we encourage somebody to work with the body and they're in pain and they don't want to work with the body, they don't want to be reminded of the pain, and maybe they've actually disassociated primarily because of the pain? And my answer to this is quite personal, and I've written about it in chapter 2 of my book, which is in my own case, when I had ME and I went to my first yoga class, I didn't really know how to respond because my coordination was so poor. So if my teacher said, lift your right leg or your left, you know, draw up your tailbone, I had no clue as to what she meant. And then very gradually, over the months as I worked with her, I started to experience pain. Now the pain had probably always been there, and in particular it was around the back of my spine, but because I had disassociated, I hadn't really felt the pain. Now in some ways we do need to experience our pain, because it's only by experiencing pain that we can then take remedy to do something about it, because pain often is a message to take some kind of action. Although of course with chronic pain, we do know that the pain receptors are maybe not informing the brain correctly. and you know, the wiring's gone a bit faulty. But the way I would work with somebody who has chronic pain is, first of all, I would maybe encourage them to go very slowly and to focus on parts of the body that were not in pain, such as the palms of the hands or maybe the feet. And then I would also encourage them to titrate, by which I mean maybe experience the pain, maybe for a minute or two, and then to disassociate again, or to take the awareness to a different part of the body, so that you're kind of coming in a little bit and then you're distracting. You're coming in a little bit and you're distracting. And ironically, the more that we come into the body, the more that we can sit with our pain. Very often that helps us to process it, because pain sometimes can be a bit like emotional pain. It can be stuck in the tissues, and it's only by sitting in meditation, bringing awareness, compassion and space to it, that it is actually able to then process, and then eventually it may release. But I would say that, you know, we do still want to come into the body and work with it as much as we possibly can. But bearing in mind, you know, that we need to be kind, particularly if there is pain. I suffer from a chronic pain issue myself, which is actually to do with my eyes. So I really understand this question, because pain can be overwhelming. It can be so difficult that it's the only thing you can think of. So to be distracted from the pain is also not a bad thing at times. But as I say, it does help to inform us when we need to take action. And yeah, you know, hopefully by coming more into our body, we are then able to process our pain. The pain I talked of in my book was to do very much with pain around my thoracic spine and my heart chakra. And it did turn out to be an emotional pain as well. So as over a period of years, I worked through that, and the pain is no longer there. So I hope that answers that question, or at least gives some indication of you know, my thinking on pain. The second question is, I'd love Fiona's wisdom on preventative measures and knowing the warning signs of ME, burnout. Well, again, we need to be connected with our body to get the warning signs. If we're disassociated, we tend to ignore or push away the symptoms. But really the symptoms are of a chronic stress pattern will usually be the first sign. So the kind of signs would be realizing that you're running a chronic, or your student is running a chronic fight and flight response and having difficulty getting back into parasympathetic tone, difficulty in relaxing and coming down, difficulty in sleeping, maybe talking very fast. I always find that's quite a good clue that somebody's very stuck in their mind, in their head, and they're running this fight-flight response chronically. Breathing, of course, so always looking at the breathing pattern. And then periods of really bad exhaustion and tiredness, which are not necessarily made better by rest. And then anxiety attacks. Now, in chapter 1 of my book, I go into all this in quite a lot of detail to say what, you know, these are the warning signs. But, you know, those are the kind of things I would be looking out for, would be this chronic fight-flight pattern, the periods of exhaustion, which are not made better by rest, anxiety, insomnia. Those are all clues that we need to be taking more rest and slowing down. Third question is, given the severity of Pippa's condition, which had been ongoing for 40 years, how do you feel that yoga therapy can help her where other interventions have failed? Is it common to meet people who've been dealing with this chronic illness for so long? Sadly, it is, I wouldn't necessarily say common, but certainly I do come across people who've had ME for a very long time, quite a lot. So yes, it is quite common. And I think that's particularly because there was no help out there in the early, 40, 30 years ago. We were not really given advice on how to deal with this situation. In fact, the advice I got when I had ME, which would have been around 1990 when I was getting ill, the advice I was given from my GP was to take more exercise and to actually do more. So the advice given then was contrary to what we would give now, which would be to pace and rest. So in the case of somebody like Pippa, who's had ME for a long time, what I would say we are doing now is we are managing symptoms. So we are helping her to feel as good as she can do within the confines of her energy. So we're helping her to maximise her energy whilst realising that she probably is unlikely at this stage to make a full recovery. Although, as I said earlier, working with things like the breath may very well help with her mitochondria and with her energy uptake. But also, I think we have to look at what does a recovery mean. So I think from the yoga perspective, obviously we don't want somebody to be in pain, we don't want somebody to be fatigued. But also I think recovery is talking very much about an idea in the future. And I think, you know, our students get hung up on this idea of when I'm better, life will be so much easier when I'm better. And then what happens is that they're not engaging with the here and now. And really, you know, kind of, I know I'm bringing philosophy into this, but really therapeutically, we want somebody to be able to manage their symptoms right now in this moment, because tomorrow they may have a good day, or tomorrow they may not have a good day. Next month, they may have a good month. Next month, they may not have a good month. But let's focus on doing the best that we can now, because I think that's really, for me, what healing is about, so that we're not taking too much focus on an idea in the future about whether we recover or not. I mean, we could relate this maybe to the pandemic, that things might be better when the pandemic passes, or maybe they won't be. We don't know what's ahead. We really have no idea. So as much as we can, if we can get the person that we're working with to think more in the present and to deal with the here and now, and to make the best and maybe to pacify the symptoms, then at that stage, that you know, what we're doing is to bring some relief to the situation. So I hope that helps to answer that question. And then question number 4. I said that there's a link between teeth and chronic fatigue syndrome. Can I please elaborate? Yeah, there's a lot of work on this. There's a particular doctor called Dr. Klinghardt, but there are other doctors also saying that if we have chronic teeth problems, such as root canals or infection in the gum, which has gone untreated, so we may go to the dentist and our teeth might look all right, but the dentist might not be picking up that we've got low-grade infection in the gum. Then what is being suggested is that our immune system is compromised, because it's having to continually kind of upgrade itself to fight the what's the word I want? It's kind of on guard against the low-grade chronic infection that might be happening, which sometimes comes back from having a root canal or from having gum or you know, a tooth infection which hasn't been picked up, and that this can lead to ME. So yes, there is some evidence to support that. So if you're interested in that, I mean, I see a holistic dentist who's down in Dorset called Moonfleet Dental Practice, but there are holistic dentists around who can take the appropriate x-rays and advise on this. But I know in the treatment of Lyme and ME, having your teeth looked at is often considered to be part of the protocol in healing the system. And some people also have all their mercury amalgams removed, which is something I did too. So I hope that helps to answer the question. And then I'm being asked, it'd be helpful if I could suggest some core pranayama and meditation exercises and asanas that are generally helpful for chronic fatigue syndrome as a starting point, and I might build into their individual program. Or what I would never suggest with chronic fatigue. So with chronic fatigue, what I would suggest, it's actually probably easier if you want to, if you would be want to come and observe me teach a whole chronic fatigue syndrome ME class. I'm starting my teaching again in November. If you email me, I can send you the Zoom link in November and you're very willing to come and see how I work, that's probably easier than me going through kind of all the techniques. And of course, in my book, I outline all the techniques. But some of the things I would never use, I would never do things like sun salutations or anything that's too strong, because in my experience, people need a lot of deep rest and healing. So we want to be thinking gently more than actually getting them moving. And I always say, you know, if people want to do exercise, they can go and do Pilates or they can go and walk. But I think the kind of yoga, therapeutic yoga that we're looking at is something that's very, very gentle and healing. Pranayama, I would always be focusing on a longer exhalation. And I also would use something like Sitkari or Sitali. So for that, I can't actually curl my tongue. I'm one of those that can't do that, but I would just demonstrate. So I would inhale through my tongue is at the back of my teeth, and I'm inhaling through my teeth, and I'm lifting my chin as I breathe in. And then I'm dropping my chin back, and then I'm exhaling through the nose. So I'll show that again. So that would be one breath I would recommend. You could use Nadi Shodhana, the alternate nostril breath. And again, focusing on a longer exhalation. Before I move into pranayama, however, I actually focus on getting the client's breath regulation back more to normal, because most people I work with don't breathe very healthily. So that might take a period of weeks or months to actually establish a more healthy breathing pattern through the nose, slowly from the diaphragm, and for the client to check on their breath throughout the day. So I tend now not to teach shoulder stand. It was something I put in my first book, but now I don't do it. And I'd never use something like Kapalabhati, although I did mention it in my first book, Beat Fatigue with Yoga, but the knowledge I've gained in the last 20 years, that's something that I wouldn't use. So really I'm focusing on breathing, deep relaxation, Shavasana, very gentle movement, and some stretching. So I hope that helps. And as I say, there is a lot more on that in my book if you're interested. What I focus on when observing clients, in other words, non-verbal responses, including conversation and practice, what I might pick up on to inform the design of the program. And then in brackets, often clients might feedback it's fine, or this is impossible, when their breath or body seem to communicate something different. Very good, but yeah, absolutely. This is so true, that we have to look at the whispers behind the words, so that we're not really paying so much attention to what is said. We're paying much more attention to how the client presents themselves. This is slightly more tricky on Zoom, I find. If I'm working one-to-one, I would be asking somebody to maybe do a forward bend, a back bend. I might ask them if I could touch them. I'd be observing, you know, the colour of their skin, things like whether they're talking fast or not, the expressions on their face. You can actually find out by looking at them whether they're in ventral vagal dominance or dorsal vagal dominance, to do with the ventral vagal system. So all these are clues as to what we really work with. So, you know, when we're working one-to-one, the first thing that comes in is observation, of which the words that are said are not primary. So yeah, so, you know, I would be picking up on posture, be picking up on how the communication, the tone of voice, the colour of the skin I've already mentioned. Yeah, just again, this is to do with experience and observation, and I think as yoga therapists, the more we can observe and practice observation, the more that helps us then with what we're designing as a result of that. So again, there's more about yoga therapy. There's 2 chapters on it in my book, but I hope that does answer the question. And then what has Fiona found to be her most reliable go-to exercise with chronic fatigue clients that will build their confidence or deliver aha moments? Well, again, you know, very much depends on the level of somebody that we're working with. So I've just lost Zoom, so I know that I'm on, so I'm just going to come back. Here I am. So, you know, somebody might be recovering from chronic fatigue and might want something a little more dynamic, and they might want a bit more movement. And somebody might be just going into it and definitely need lots of relaxation and pacing. So the thing about yoga therapy, of course, is that it all depends on the individual. But I mentioned at the beginning of this recording that I always encourage everybody to do a yoga nidra once a day, because it encourages this very, very deep state of relaxation, which is deeply healing. So yoga nidra, definitely. Learning to breathe more slowly, definitely. Learning to come home and be in more, come home to the body, feel safe in the body and be more embodied, definitely. And I've already explained that if there's pain, you can work slowly on that, maybe building up a resource or using something like hands and feet first, or titrating. And encouraging a feeling of safety, because many people with chronic fatigue syndrome don't feel safe in their body. So these are all the kinds of things that I think do make people feel aha. And actually, I can give an example. I've been working recently with somebody who's had terrible trauma in her life, and then she became ill with COVID and she developed post-COVID fatigue. And her big aha moment was learning that she could make friends with her body. And again, we did this slowly, but she's now very joyous about it. And she often messages me to say how much she appreciates her body. And, you know, it's really encouraging as a yoga teacher to hear somebody be so enthusiastic, knowing what her background is. But she realizes that she spent 38 years not being in her body. And now she is in her body, and she's just finding life so much more joyful. And she's also much more mindful because she's in her body. She's kind of slowing right down and not rushing through life superficially, but really enjoying every moment that she gets. So the aha moment is different for each client, of course, and sometimes it comes straight away. Sometimes it might take a few months or even years, but hopefully not as long as that. But yoga is a magical business. We're just the facilitators. I'm just a facilitator. But, you know, I think it's a great privilege to be able to share this with people. So I think that's answered all the questions as best I can. I hope that's helped and been of use. Please do email me. I'll just put my website in the chat box before I finish. So if you want to go to my website, you've got details there of my classes if you want to kind of observe. And the first class is free anyway, so and of course I wouldn't charge you if you wanted to come and observe how I teach. As I say, I'm starting again in November. There's also details on there of the chants I mentioned, which is on the book page. So if you want to go to the book page and you scroll to the bottom, the chants are there for you to listen to so that you can then incorporate them in your teaching. And there's a few other resources on my site as well. Such as there's a few downloads and things which are free. So I hope that will be helpful. Please do get in contact if there's anything I've not answered or if I can be of any further help. So can I say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching, and particularly thank you for work that you're doing with ME and chronic fatigue, because it's so invaluable. There's so many people out there who need this. So I know it's very deeply appreciated by the many people who have chronic fatigue or ME. So thank you, and I wish you a very happy autumn, and maybe I'll see you again in the future, or maybe at the class. Thank you all. Bye.